Okay, so, when you're thinking about getting a dog, or even thinking back on your, past furry companions, there's that big question that always pops into your head.
Yeah.
When do you actually start the training?
Yeah.
Is it better to dive in during puppyhood with all that, that adorable chaos?
Yeah.
Or is it smarter to wait until they've kind of settled into adulthood?
Right.
You might be picturing, those tiny puppy teeth right now, or maybe a, calmer, more mature dog. But it's something that I think a lot of us ponder.
Absolutely. And that's really what we're going to be exploring in this deep dive is, moving past the idea of a single right answer.
Right.
Our aim isn't to declare a champion in the puppy versus adult dog training arena.
Yeah.
It's more to unpack and dissect the distinct advantages and the specific hurdles that you'll encounter when training at different stages of a dog's life.
And to get there, we've been looking closely at, the ins and outs of this very topic, the whole spectrum of training a puppy versus an adult dog. So let's get right into it. Let's kick things off by looking at those early puppy months. What's the real story when it comes to training them?
Well, I think one concept that often takes center stage is this idea of the puppy as a blank slate.
Right?
And there's definitely a truth there because they haven't yet established, deeply ingrained habits, whether desirable or undesirable.
Yeah.
You really have this prime opportunity to guide their initial learning and set the stage for the behaviors that you want to see flourish. And this malleability isn't just about preventing bad habits, It's also an unparalleled opportunity to proactively shape their core temperament towards confidence and sociability.
Yeah.
A window that, gradually closes.
A blank slate. That's a powerful image.
Yeah.
So it's not just about stopping the naughty stuff. It's actively building the good stuff in. And this connects to that crucial period we hear about, the critical socialization period, right?
Right.
Can you elaborate on why that's so key?
Absolutely. So roughly between 3 and 14 weeks of age, puppies exhibit this heightened receptiveness to novel experiences.
Yeah.
It's really a fleeting but vital window for positive introductions to a wide spectrum of people, other animals, diverse environments, and a variety of different situations. And those constructive encounters during this phase lay an incredibly strong foundation for a confident and well-adjusted adult dog. Think of it as almost like an inoculation against potential fear-based behavioral issues down the road.
So exposing them to different sights, sounds, smells, all that variety early on really helps them become more resilient and less easily spooked down the line.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. And it's not just about preventing fear, is it? It also plays a big role in establishing that initial bond with their human family.
Right. It's about starting to build that communication and that trust. So commencing training early on really fosters that essential communication and trust between you and your puppy.
Okay.
And those initial positive reinforcement experiences are the very building blocks of a lasting positive relationship.
Yeah.
And, a puppy who learns through enjoyable methods often matures into a dog who genuinely enjoys learning and is enthusiastic about participating in training.
Right.
And it just becomes this really rewarding partnership for both of you.
Which sounds like the ideal scenario.
Right.
And I'd imagine that getting started early also means that you can nip some common puppy behaviors in the bud.
Absolutely.
Before they kind of escalate into bigger problems later on.
Often addressing a behavior early is far more effective than trying to correct a deeply ingrained issue later.
Right. And, a prime example of this is chewing.
Yeah.
By proactively teaching a puppy what is acceptable to chew on from the get-go, their designated toys, not your beloved furniture,
right?
You can significantly decrease the likelihood of destructive chewing becoming a persistent problem later in life.
Right, yeah.
You're basically, laying down the rules of the house from day one in a really positive way.
That's a really clear example. But we all know puppyhood isn't always smooth sailing.
Right.
What are some of the real challenges that come with trying to train those tiny, energetic bundles?
Well, I think one of the most significant hurdles is their characteristically short attention spans.
Right.
We're often talking about training sessions that might only last for 2 to 5 minutes before their focus shifts to the next enticing thing that comes along.
Right.
And, their inherent playfulness, while certainly charming, also means that they are, very, very easily distracted.
Yeah. So a healthy dose of patience is definitely required when we're talking about training puppies.
2 to 5 minutes. That's a tight window.
Yeah.
You'd really have to be efficient and make every single interaction count.
Right.
What else makes puppy training a unique challenge?
It's important to remember that physically and mentally, they are still under construction. They're still developing at a very rapid pace. Their young bodies can't handle the same level of physical exertion as a fully grown dog.
Right.
And their cognitive abilities are, still maturing. So this naturally limits the complexity of what you can realistically teach them in those very early months. You're really focusing on the basics.
So no marathon training sessions for the little ones. That's a good point to keep in mind.
Exactly.
And I'm guessing that progress isn't always a steady upward curve either, is it?
No, not at all. Puppies, they go through various developmental phases.
Yeah.
And this includes what we call fear periods, which can sometimes feel like you're taking a step backwards in your training journey.
Right.
They might perfectly execute a command one day and then seem to have completely forgotten it the next.
Yeah.
But it's a normal part of their neurological and emotional development.
The unpredictable nature of puppy development. So short bursts of attention, physical limitations, and those developmental ups and downs.
Right.
It sounds like it demands a lot of frequent, brief training sessions.
Precisely. And because they learn best in these small focused intervals,
Right.
you do need to be prepared to conduct more frequent but shorter training sessions throughout the day. And this can indeed represent a significant time commitment for owners.
Okay, that gives us a good picture of puppy training. Now let's shift gears and talk about training adult dogs. What are the key advantages you see there?
Well, I think one of the most immediately noticeable differences is their greater capacity for focus and often a longer attention span. Adult dogs can usually concentrate for longer periods, which can lead to more productive training sessions and often a quicker grasp of new commands. Yeah. You have a little bit more time to work through things, without their minds drifting quite as readily.
That sounds like a welcome change of pace from those fleeting puppy moments.
Right.
And they're also physically and mentally more equipped for training, right?
Absolutely. They're physically mature and generally they possess greater mental stamina.
Okay.
This means they can handle more complex training tasks.
Right.
They can participate in longer training sessions and even engage in, more physically demanding activities like agility, should that be something that you're interested in pursuing.
So you can potentially aim for more advanced skills earlier on. What about how you communicate with an adult dog during training? Is that a different experience?
I think it can be clearer in certain respects. An adult dog's personality and their typical ways of communicating are more established.
Right.
As someone guiding their learning, you can often get a better read on their individual learning style, what really motivates them, and how they tend to respond to different cues.
Right.
And this insight, it can lead to more effective and tailored training approaches.
Yeah.
You can really fine-tune your methods to suit that specific dog's, needs and preferences.
That makes sense. You have more behavioral history to work with in a way.
Right.
And I can see how, the results of training an adult dog might translate more readily into everyday practical situations.
Absolutely. Training achievements with adult dogs often do transfer to real-world contexts more swiftly. They possess the maturity to understand and apply what they've learned in different environments more readily than a very young puppy. So if you successfully teach them a reliable stay command, they're generally going to be better at understanding what that entails across different settings.
Okay, so longer focus, physical readiness, clearer communication, and quicker application in real life.
Yeah.
That all sounds pretty appealing.
It can be.
But just like with puppies, there must be some challenges unique to training an adult dog.
Right. There certainly are. And I think one of the most common challenges that you might encounter is the presence of pre-existing habits. And sometimes these habits are unwanted behaviors.
Right.
Adult dogs, particularly those with unknown backgrounds or limited prior training, they may have developed patterns of behavior that need to be addressed and essentially unlearned before new positive behaviors can take root.
Right.
So, this can require a lot of patience and consistency on the part of the owner.
Right.
It's almost like, you're trying to gently redirect a well-worn path.
like trying to rewrite a chapter in a book that's already been written, as someone once said.
Yeah.
And what about that critical socialization window we discussed with puppies?
Right?
If an adult dog missed out on that early exposure, what are the potential consequences for training?
Well, if an adult dog didn't receive adequate socialization during that crucial puppy phase, they may have developed fears or anxieties that can make certain aspects of training more complex. And while it is absolutely possible to socialize an adult dog, the process often progresses more gradually and necessitates a very careful and positive and patient approach. You're working to build their confidence and reshape their emotional responses to certain stimuli.
So it's not an insurmountable obstacle, but it might require more specialized strategies and a greater understanding of their potential anxieties. What about those deeply ingrained behavior patterns you mentioned? Do those inherently make training more difficult?
Adult dogs they've simply had more time to practice certain behaviors, which can make those patterns more deeply ingrained and potentially more resistant to modification. This doesn't mean that change is impossible. Far from it. But it may require more time, consistent effort, and really a deeper understanding of the underlying motivations behind those behaviors to really help them adopt new ones.
And I imagine, particularly with rescue dogs who may have had difficult pasts, building trust is a critical first step before any real training can even begin.
Oh, absolutely. Adult dogs who have experienced negative situations or harsh treatment in the past may understandably be more hesitant or even fearful during training. So building a strong foundation of trust and creating a safe and positive learning environment becomes an essential prerequisite before any effective training can really commence. You need to earn their trust and demonstrate to them that, training interactions are going to be rewarding and not at all threatening.
So regardless of whether you're navigating the boundless energy of a puppy or addressing the established patterns of an adult dog, there are definitely distinct factors to consider for each. Now, I've come across information about something called brain training for dogs, and it sounds quite interesting. How does that factor into this whole puppy versus adult dog training discussion?
Well, I think what's really fascinating here is that mental stimulation can be a really powerful tool at any stage of a dog's life. And brain training for dogs as a methodology really, really underscores this. It's designed to be adaptable and effective for dogs across the age spectrum, from very young puppies just starting to explore the world,
all the way through to senior dogs who might be, facing new cognitive challenges.
So it's not limited by age.
No, it's not.
What are the core principles behind it that make it so universally applicable?
Well, I think one key aspect is that it offers adaptable levels of difficulty. So the exercises and games can be adjusted to match a dog's current skill level and prior learning experiences. So a young puppy can begin, with simpler introductory games. While an adult dog who might have some training under their belt can progress to more complex and engaging variations. It's really about meeting each individual dog at their current level.
That's a smart design. It's not a rigid one-size-fits-all approach. What else contributes to its broad applicability?
Well, it places a significant emphasis on engagement and positive motivation. So rather than relying on punishment or outdated dominance-based techniques.
It utilizes games and activities that tap into a dog's, natural intelligence, their problem-solving abilities, their inherent desire to interact, with their human companion. And this, this positive and stimulating approach, it's proven effective whether your dog is a 3-month-old whirlwind of energy or an 8-year-old who's, encountered many different training methods.
So it essentially makes learning a fun and rewarding experience.
Absolutely.
Which probably helps to maintain those, shorter puppy attention spans
Right.
and keeps adult dogs mentally stimulated and interested.
Exactly. And the program is, it's often structured to build skills in a progressive manner.
Okay.
So one game or activity will lay the groundwork for the next,
Right.
allowing dogs to develop their abilities at their own pace.
Mm-hmm.
And this works well for puppies who are encountering new concepts for the first time, and also for adult dogs who might need to reinforce
Right.
previous learning or acquire entirely new skills.
That makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
A step-by-step learning curve
Yeah.
that can be tailored to each dog's individual progress.
Exactly.
And you also mentioned that it can strengthen the bond between the dog and owner,
Right.
which is particularly important for adult dogs who might have had less than ideal experiences in the past.
Absolutely. At its heart, brain training for dogs really prioritizes, enhancing the communication and strengthening the relationship between the dog and their owner.
Mm-hmm.
So this bond building element, it's beneficial for all dogs, but it can be particularly valuable in helping to overcome any trust deficits that some, adult rescue dogs, for example, might bring with them.
Right.
It really fosters this positive and collaborative dynamic in the training partnership.
This sounds like a really useful tool, regardless of the dog's age.
I think so.
Now, if someone is in the process of deciding whether to bring a puppy or an adult dog into their life,
right,
with training being, a key consideration, what are some crucial factors they should really be thinking about?
This raises a really important question, What are your personal training goals and what resources, particularly time and energy, can you realistically dedicate to the training process? Be honest with yourself about your comfort level and experience with dogs. Are you prepared for the intensive demands of puppyhood or house training, the nipping, the need for constant supervision? Or would you feel, more confident in dressing and potentially modifying established behaviors in an adult dog?
Right.
Self-awareness is really crucial here.
That's a great point. Knowing yourself and your limitations.
Yeah.
What else should someone considering this decision take into account?
Well, also consider your lifestyle. And the amount of time you realistically have available on a daily basis. Puppies, they demand a significant time investment with those, frequent short training sessions.
Right.
And the near constant supervision that's required, especially in those early months. Adult dogs might need less intensive day-to-day monitoring, but addressing, specific behavioral issues could require more focused and structured training sessions.
Time commitment is definitely a huge factor to consider.
It is.
What about their existing household situation?
Yeah.
Especially if there are young children or other pets already in the picture.
Absolutely. That's a critical consideration. Families with very young children, they might find that an already trained adult dog with a well-established and predictable temperament could integrate more smoothly into the household dynamics.
Right.
Others, they might prefer to raise a puppy alongside their growing children.
Yeah.
But really, really carefully consider the energy levels and the potential challenges of introducing either a young developing puppy or an adult dog with a potentially unknown history into your existing family unit.
And finally, what about their specific training aspirations?
Right.
Does what they hope to achieve with their dog influence whether a puppy or an adult dog might be a better match?
Absolutely. If you have very specific goals in mind, for instance, if you're hoping to train, a future working dog, a therapy dog, or a competitive partner in a dog sport like agility, starting with a puppy allows you to really actively shape their development from a young age.
Right.
However, it's important to remember that, many adult dogs can also excel in these very same areas with dedicated and appropriate training. It really depends on the individual dog's, temperament, their aptitude, and your specific aspirations.
So it truly is a very personal decision with a wide range of factors to carefully weigh.
It is.
But what's the overarching message here? What's the key takeaway from our deep dive into this puppy versus adult dog training discussion?
I think the most significant takeaway is that effective training can be initiated at any age.
Okay.
And while puppies and adult dogs each present, their own set of advantages and challenges for the trainer,
Right.
A consistent, positive, and patient approach to training will ultimately yield, positive results regardless of when you begin that journey. It truly is, never too late to start training a dog and building that stronger connection.
That's really reassuring to hear. So regardless of the dog's age, the key is the approach you take.
Yeah. Precisely. And it's important to remember that every single dog is an individual. Some puppies, might demonstrate remarkable focus and learn, very, very quickly. Other adult dogs might require a bit more time and repetition to grasp new concepts.
Yeah.
The crucial element is to meet your dog where they are in their developmental stage and build upon their current understanding and celebrate, every milestone of progress along the way.
And those resources that we discussed earlier, like brain training for dogs, can provide that much needed structure and effective methods to help any dog, at any stage of life.
Exactly. And they offer, a flexible framework and a variety of techniques that can be adapted to suit, the unique needs and learning style of any canine companion that you might welcome into your life.
Here's where it gets really interesting. It's less about the, number of years on the calendar and much more about the quality of the partnership that you build, the patience that you bring to the process, and the positive training methods that you consistently employ.
Absolutely. It truly comes down to, understanding your dog as an individual learner and being willing to explore and implement strategies that resonate best with them.
So to bring our deep dive to a close, we've discovered that both puppies and adult dogs offer, their own unique sets of strengths and challenges when it comes to training.
Absolutely.
And effective training isn't limited by their age. It's fundamentally about consistency, positive reinforcement, and a deep understanding of your individual dog's specific needs and how they learn best.
That's right. And the focus really shifts from that initial question of when should I start to the more insightful question of how can I best support my individual dog's, ongoing learning journey, regardless of their age.
So what does this all mean for you and your future or current furry friend?
Yeah.
It sounds like, the most important thing is to take the plunge,
Absolutely.
be patient with the process, and really savor the experience of, learning and growing together, no matter when you welcome them into your life.
Exactly. And maybe building on that, consider taking a moment to reflect on your own learning style and preferences. You might find that those insights offer, valuable clues into how your dog is most likely to learn effectively. And maybe explore, some of the many, many resources that are available on positive reinforcement training methods. You might be surprised by the depth of understanding and the effectiveness of those techniques.